The word crisis is often overused. It is defined as a decisive moment or a time of danger or great difficulty. It's from the Oxford University Press, 2017. Describing the conditions we are currently seeing across most Western Australian prisons as a crisis is an apt use of the word. Those are the opening lines in a report that was tabled today. A report about show cause notice for Hakea Prison, Casuarina Prison and Melaleuca Women's Prison, prepared by the Office of the Inspector of Custodial Services. And the recommendations, the outcomes, the conclusions made in that report are to say that the state of our prison system is an absolute crisis. It is absolutely in a state of failure, and this has been coming for some time. This storm is definitely not new. It has been brewing for many years. In 2024, the Inspector of Custodial Services had a report into the inspection of Hakea Prison. Now, the inspector's role involves inspecting all of the prisons and corrections facilities across WA every 3 years or so. Now, Hakea is a remand prison, so the majority of people who are in that prison are still awaiting trial, or in some cases they're awaiting their sentencing. That means that some of them may be found not guilty, yet they still are spending significant amounts of time in a prison which has been judged as completely unfit for purpose and with conditions that are inhumane. The focus of Hakea is supposed to be on rehabilitation, but the findings by the inspector demonstrate that there is absolutely minimal chance for rehabilitation for prisoners. The overview from that 2024 report came to the conclusion that unacceptable conditions in Hakea Prison continue. They are of such concern that in 2024, in May, the inspector took what he described as an unusual step of issuing the Director-General of the Department of Justice with a show cause notice. And the reason for this was that he formed a view, and I will quote, that at the time prisoners in Hakea were being treated in a manner that was cruel, inhuman or degrading. We observed increasing levels of anger and frustration in prisoners, which was leading to challenging or dangerous behaviour, including suicides, suicide attempts, self-harm, serious self-harm and assaults. And at that time, the inspector acknowledged that there was work being done, that this is a focus of the government, but their ongoing monitoring showed that with very few exceptions, conditions have not improved significantly. The conditions are so bad and the findings so appalling that the inspector did a follow-up. So instead of waiting another 3 years, we have a 2025 follow-up inspection of Hakea Prison that was tabled in June of 2025. We could have hoped to see some improvements, some changes, but the inspector's findings are that Hakea Prison is symptomatic of a prison system in crisis. The conditions were described as unacceptable, entirely unacceptable, and it's symptomatic of a bigger problem that is impacting every prison in Western Australia. Our prisons are overcrowded, understaffed, and if we have any hope that people will come out of prison rehabilitated, absolutely not under the system that we have. Under the 2024 report, the inspector outlined 15 recommendations, a lot of different detail, things like that prisoners should be able to have a shower every day, basic human rights, basic requirements to treat people with dignity and treat them as humans. In the 2025 follow-up report, clearly the inspector decided to focus in on 6 core recommendations, and the priority recommendation was that an inquiry is required, that the issues being faced are systemic, they're across the board, they cannot be addressed easily, and an inquiry was requested. The inspector cannot initiate a government inquiry, but asked the minister to consider this. Now, the Minister has rejected the call for an inquiry, and I will turn to that shortly. But before I talk about our estimates process and the hearing with Corrective Services, I would just highlight that on the 11th of March, the Director-General received a show cause notice about 3 prisons. This is about not only Hakea, but also about Casuarina and Melaleuca. On the 8th of April, the Minister received the same show cause notice with details of the terrible conditions in these prisons. During estimates, the Minister for Corrective Services was asked if he believed that an inquiry was required, and his opinion was that he and the Inspector agreed to disagree on the requirement for any further inquiry. The Inspector's comments throughout these reports, the findings are that the treatment of individuals in prison is inhumane. When that comment, those findings were presented to the Minister during estimates and his comments were sought, he said that he and the Inspector would probably diverge on this area as well. I think the current conditions are uncomfortable, undoubtedly, but I would probably disagree about the language, that description. So clearly the Inspector has a very different opinion to the Minister about what is actually required in this space, and that takes us to the report that was tabled today. I wish I had a bit more time to go through it in detail because the findings are horrific, so I'll just draw out a couple of conclusions and comments made by the Inspector. The population across the prison system in WA has been rising at an unsustainable rate over the last 3 to 4 years. There's comments and data and information provided about prisoners who are in cells that are designed for 1 or 2 people that are already triple bunking, so there's 3 prisoners in there. At Hakea, prisoners are reporting 23 hours a day in their cells, in their overcrowded cells. There have been many people sleeping on a mattress on the floor in our prison system. Over the almost 2 years after the initial show cause notice was issued in respect of Hakea, conditions have not materially improved and, very concerningly, similar conditions are now evident in both Melaleuca and Casuarina. The Inspector's report today has one recommendation that the government must formally commit to and fund the system-level reforms required to address the concerns identified at Hakea, Melaleuca and Casuarina prisons and across the adult custodial system more broadly. Within 6 months of the tabling of this report, the Department must develop, approve and publicly release a comprehensive costed reform implementation plan endorsed by government. This plan must finalise and clearly articulate short, medium and long-term reform initiatives, including operational, workforce, infrastructure and governance reforms. 2, identify which initiatives have been approved by government and fully resourced, including recurrent and capital funding allocations. 3, specify a clear and time-bound implementation schedule for each reform, including commencement and completion dates. And 4, assign accountable senior officers for delivery of each reform initiative. And the reason that the Commissioner is taking the Inspector is taking such strong language and such firm requirements of the government is that the enduring population pressure and workforce instability has normalised restricted regimes and unsafe environments. There are escalating harms and risks, parallels with prior serious custodial incidents. The Inspector is saying these conditions lead to riots. Throughout the report, there's highlights of the issues for staff that are being the issues staff face, the issues of mental health, of health needs not being addressed. And I'll turn to the comments of my colleagues from the other place. Adam Hort, the member for Kalamunda, the shadow for Corrective Services, says, "A prison system that has no space for criminals, cannot rehabilitate criminals and cannot safely manage criminals is a direct threat to every Western Australia. We call on the Minister to be sacked."